بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our brother introduced the talk by talking a little bit about addiction and how there are Muslims in our communities who are very much, yes, it's a very, very real problem. And yes, drug addiction, pornography addiction, etc., etc., etc. And I was invited here to speak about marijuana, and the obvious choice was, well, speak about marijuana and speak about addiction. And I kind of wanted to pump the brakes on that a little bit and say, look, it's hard to treat addiction, it's hard to help someone with addiction when that addiction isn't recognized as an addiction. So when someone says, look, this is not causing me any problems, it's not impeding the quality of my life, it's not affecting my relationships, it's not harming me in any way, so even if I am addicted, right, what's the big deal? Like, why is it so problematic? So a person, and I've heard this analogy before as well, they'll say like, oh, you're telling me I'm addicted to marijuana, but you're addicted to chai, right? You're addicted to tea, or you're addicted to your coffee, right? So you can function as a normal human being with your tea and your coffee or whatever, and yes, you're addicted to it, but you're fine, and you're never going to speak out against somebody who is addicted to tea. So why is it that people will speak out against marijuana? And not only, you'll hear people say like, not only does marijuana not affect the quality of my life in a negative way, as a matter of fact, you'll hear people say that marijuana actually increases the quality of my life. And you'll hear people say like, I'm a better person when I've smoked a joint, right? I'm better at my job. I'm more calm. I'm more friendly. I'm less stressed out, so on and so forth. And that's why before ever getting into addiction, for me it's important that for us as Muslims, we understand marijuana and its place in the Sharia, and how the Sharia, how Islam actually views marijuana. So in order to do that, there's a couple principles that our deen teaches us, that our religion teaches us, that we need to understand. And these principles apply to anything that we consume, anything that we put into our bodies. The first principle, y'all ready for this? First principle? Yes? Yes? The first principle regarding that which we consume is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divided all matters that we consume into two broad categories. The first category is that which is good and permissible. At-tayyibat wal-halal. So those good matters, and they're also permissible. So for example, a clear example of this would be drinking water, right? Water is something which is tayyib, it is good. It is good for us, and obviously it is something which is permissible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made permissible. On the other hand, we have those matters which are the khaba'ith. These are the bad, impure matters, the matters that affect us in a negative way, wal haram, right? And therefore those matters have been made permissible. Yes, they're available on earth. They can be naturally available, or they can be man-made, but they are those matters which come under the category of the khaba'ith, the impure, bad, nasty things, right, that we don't consume, and therefore they are haram for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-A'raf tells us that one of the jobs of the Prophet ﷺ, one of his responsibilities was to clarify for mankind the halal from the haram, the tayyibat min al-khaba'ith. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. That the Prophet ﷺ was sent to make halal for mankind the tayyibat, to make permissible for them those matters which are pure and those matters which are good. وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. And to also make impermissible, or at least convey to us the impermissibility of those matters which are bad, those matters which are impure. So this first principle that we understand tells us that everything that we consume, the question we ask ourselves is, does this fall into category number 1, or does it fall into category number 2? Is it from the tayyibat and halal, or is it from the khaba'ith and therefore the haram? The second principle that applies to those things that which we consume, the things that we put in our body, is that it is impermissible, or we should say rather, everything that is harmful, dangerous, is automatically made impermissible for us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not kill or do not hurt, do not harm yourselves. So as a Muslim, we cannot knowingly harm ourselves. If we know something will kill us, we're not allowed to take part in it. If we know something will harm us or injure us or affect us either psychologically or affect our bodies, and we know it is harmful for us, and yes, there's a lot of details to this principle, but this is a principle that we as Muslims, we're not supposed to indulge or take part in those matters. And I know a lot of you probably right now are thinking about cigarettes, right? 20, 30 years ago, the vast majority of our scholars, if you ask them for a fatwa regarding cigarettes, they would say it is not haram, it is makruh, right? Meaning you're not sinful, but it is something that should be avoided. It is something which is disliked. Then, as we did more research, and as scientifically and medically we found out that cigarettes actually kill you, they cause cancer and so on and so forth, the ruling changed. Because the ruling was understood to be now, look, cigarettes can kill you. And there's a very, very high chance that even if it doesn't kill you, and I always hear the argument, subhanAllah, you may have heard this as well. Someone says, I have an uncle who's like 80 years old, back home, like in the village or whatever. This dude, he's been smoking his whole life, right? He's 80 or 70, and he's as strong as a horse, right? And how can you say the cigarettes are haram? The reality is that he may be living and breathing, but it doesn't mean that he's doing well. If we were to x-ray his lungs, they'd be charred and blacked out. And the quality of his life, 100% is extremely compromised because of his habit of cigarette smoking. Yes, not every single person will die within a set amount of years when they smoke, but the vast majority will. And the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rulings of Islam, are not built upon the exceptions, right? So, meaning if most people smoke cigarettes and they'll get cancer or they'll get a disease and they'll die, that's what the Sharia looks like. The Sharia doesn't say, look, there's one dude out of a million who smoked and didn't die, and therefore cigarettes are halal, right? So once again, those matters that would cause harm to us, that can kill us, those are not permissible for us. Principle number 3, just like it is impermissible for us to harm ourselves, likewise, it is impermissible for us to harm others, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "La darara wa la dirar." He said, there's no causing of harm nor reciprocating harm. That you're not allowed to harm someone, nor even, subhanAllah, in cases where someone harms you, you harm them back, harm yourself, you harm another person. This is something which is not permissible. Now, when we look at marijuana, when we talk about pot, we have to take into account these principles. And we have to take into account, yes, the way marijuana is perceived in our culture, the way marijuana is perceived in the society that we live in. And yes, we as human beings, we go through waves and cycles. We can take a look at alcohol, and it's a beautiful, beautiful analogy for marijuana. Because if you look at American history, there was a time where alcohol itself was banned, right? The prohibition, if you ever heard of the prohibition, right? There were people who said, look, yeah, a good aspect of the society, they enjoy alcohol and they help them socialize and so on and so forth, but the harms are too much, right? And so alcohol was banned. And then it went through a resurgence, then the prohibition went away, and then alcohol was accepted, and went through a time where alcohol was not only considered acceptable, it was encouraged, and it became part of our culture and society and so on and so forth. And now we're kind of at the place where people are starting to doubt their views on alcohol. So now people are taking a look at marijuana and they're saying, look, marijuana went through a cycle, right? For a good portion of history, American history, in the last 100 years or so, marijuana had a very strong push. There's a lot of propaganda that made marijuana out to be the worst thing in the world, right? And that propaganda worked so well that people couldn't see that alcohol is far, 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 far more dangerous and more life-threatening than marijuana, right? So marijuana went through that as well, where it was viewed as being something completely negative. And then what happened? Well, then people started to say, well, marijuana is actually not that bad and there's benefits and so on and so forth. And now we're living in a time where marijuana is making a resurgence, right? It's being made legal and this and that, and it's even becoming more and more socially acceptable. And people have started to look down upon alcohol, right? So it goes through waves. This is the society. This is the way culture works. But us as Muslims, we are supposed to have our morals and our ideals fixed. We are not like a tree that is dead on the inside, that has no roots in the ground, that doesn't have any principles. A tree that has very weak roots, the wind will blow in one direction and it will blow it in this way. The wind will blow in another direction, it will blow it in the other way. A Muslim is supposed to be like a tree. The roots of it are firm, they're grounded. So no matter what is happening in society and culture, no matter what waves we are going through, that we as Muslims, we know and we understand our principles. So if we're talking about alcohol, and where people were saying, alcohol is actually good for you, and alcohol has benefits, and it helps you socialize, and whatever, and therefore it should be made legal, and all that kind of stuff, a Muslim should have known that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already told the Prophet ﷺ, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ, that they ask you, O Muhammad ﷺ, about alcohol and gambling. قُلْ, say to them, فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. Say that within them there is a great amount of sin. There's a great amount of problems. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. And also, there is benefit for mankind. So, and this is a point that I know a lot of du'at and speakers always bring up, right? Where they're like, look, as Muslims, Allah has already told us there's benefits in alcohol. But Allah has told us that there's a great amount of sin and problems and harm in alcohol. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِن نَفْعِهِمَا. The harms of it, the sin of it, far outweighs any benefit there is in alcohol. Right? And so now as a Muslim, regardless of what's happening in terms of is alcohol legal or not, is it socially acceptable or not, it doesn't matter. Because our foundation is firm. Likewise, when it comes to marijuana, regardless of how society feels about it, regardless of its legalization and so on and so forth, as a Muslim, in terms of, look, is this something which falls into category number one, the halal and tayyib, or is this something which falls into the khaba'ith and the haram, right? And for us, it's, alcohol, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clarified for us alcohol because it makes so many things easy for us. As soon as the discussion started, and by the way, the discussion on marijuana is not a new discussion. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, hundreds of years ago, has a long discussion on something very, very similar to marijuana. So people will say like this is a modern day problem. It's not a modern day problem. This has been happening for a long time. And so this is not something new to our scholars. And so our scholars mention that alcohol is a wonderful example given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because it encompasses so many different things. I know when we think of alcohol, we think of beer and wine and vodka and so on and so forth, right? But actually, alcohol, or khamr, as it is called in Arabic, or as it is referred to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet, it's not called alcohol, it's called khamr. And Allah didn't leave it at that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually told us what khamr is by sending the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-khamru ma khamara al-aqal. He said, khamr is that which befogs the mind. Al-khamr, once again, Al-khamru ma khamar al-aqal. Khamar is that which befogs the mind. So anything, any substance, any liquid, whatever it may be, that befogs our mind, shar'an, it is considered what? It's considered what? Alcohol, right? And that's why in another hadith, Prophet said, "Kullu muskirin khamar wa kullu khamrin haram." He said, every muskir, every intoxicant, anything that would intoxicate you, is khamar. Kullu muskirin khamar wa kullu khamrin haram. Every type of intoxicant is considered khamar, and every khamar is what? Haram. So it's not about the specific intoxication. I know this is where people have a problem when you draw an analogy between alcohol and pot, right? People say, look, when somebody is drunk, right, they behave very differently to the way they behave when they're high. It's not about the type of intoxication. It's about the fact that they're intoxicated, right? So one of the things that I hear a lot from a lot of young people is that they say, you can't drive when you're drunk, but you can smoke. You can drive when you're high. And I'm like, that makes me think of that means one of two things. Either number one, it tells me that you've never smoked pot, right? Or right? Or it tells me that you have smoked pot, but you've never tried driving, right? So, yes, the type of driving is different, right? So what happens when you drive and you're high, right? Obviously, people are affected by marijuana in different ways. Some people get more paranoid, and some people get more this and that or whatever. Obviously, there's different types of highs. But the point is that here's a common example of what can happen when somebody is high and they get into the car, right? They get into their car, they're baked, right? They get into the car and they pull onto the highway. The speed limit, if you're in this area, let's say they're on 495, the speed limit is, what's the speed limit? 55, right? 55, meaning most people in Maryland, Virginia drive what?
About 80.
80? I'm not going to say that, but 70, is that fair? 60 to 70, let's just say, all right? 70, or let's say 10 miles over, right? So 64, stay under the 10 miles, right? That's the average speed limit. So as long as there's no traffic, cars are zooming by at 65 miles an hour. And my homie gets in the car, he's baked, and he pulls on to the highway, and what's happening for him? Everything is slowed down, right? His perception is extremely altered. So he's in the car, and someone has told me, someone personally, experienced this firsthand, right? So you're in the car, and you're driving, and your senses get heightened. And so even 10 miles an hour feels very fast. So the person's in the left lane, right, doing 15 miles an hour, and they're like, oh my God, I'm going so fast right now, right? And is that a hazard? Of course it's a hazard, right? Also, when a person is high, and as I said, people are affected in different ways. They get, different highs. But some people get very focused when they're high. They focus on certain things, right? And they're like obsessed on certain things. So one brother told me, like, if he's driving and he's high, he can hear the tire on the pavement. And he's like, man, can you hear that? Like the tire's like rolling around and around and around. So is that different? Is that different than being drunk? Yes, it is different. But is there any question that the person is intoxicated? No, there's no question, right? So the intoxication is there, like I said. The only issue is that people, sometimes they say the intoxication, because it's not the same type of intoxication as alcohol, they'll say, oh, it's not khamar. But shar'an, there is no distinction between the type of intoxication. The only question is, does this matter intoxicate us or not? That is the question that we should be asking when we're looking at marijuana, when we're looking at pot. This is the question. And for me, after dealing with this issue for quite a long time, I used to teach a class called the Fiqh of Chillin, in which we talked about drugs and alcohol and so on and so forth. And I taught that class for about, I think 2, 3, 4 years. And I learned a lot about speaking about marijuana and like the science of it, and even like the neurological studies and so on and so forth. And I always had a person who would come to me and say, you know what, but it's not that bad, right? Like, I'll be okay, right? Like, I know myself, like, I'll be okay, I'll be fine, and so on and so forth. Putting the principle of that which is haram in a large amount is haram in a small amount, ma kathiruhu haram fa qaliluhu haram, putting that principle aside for a second, right? But someone says, I'm okay, I can function, I'll be all right, you know, it's not a big deal or whatever. For me, after talking about marijuana for so long, the more important question for me became not giving the ruling, right? Because if you want a ruling, I mean, let's just be real, you like log on and ask the biggest sheikh in the world, Sheikh Google, right? And Sheikh Google, this homie, will spit out plenty of rulings for you. Whatever ruling you want. You want it to be halal, khalas, Sheikh Google will hook you up. You want it to be haram, Sheikh Google will hook you up with a haram ruling. It's all up to you, right? So the question is not about finding a ruling, and that's not really why I came here today. To once again, I wanted to give you some background in terms of like where this ruling comes from. But for me, the bigger issue is what is happening on a psychological, emotional, and spiritual level when we feel the need or we have the desire to justify smoking pot or justify being involved in any drug, really, for that matter. Even music, which I'm not here to talk about music, and I know people love talking about the permissibility of music and so on and so forth, and I used to talk about that, right? Halal music, haram music, is it haram, halal, all that kind of stuff. And then once again, I came to the conclusion after speaking for so long that, look, is it possible? And I think most Muslims can agree. This is where, regardless of the ruling of music or pot or whatever it may be, I think most Muslims can agree that there are negative effects, and some of the effects are extremely negative, right? We're talking about music. There are types of music that the message itself is a toxic, poisonous message, not only for us, but for our children, for our families, for our women, for our men, for everybody, right? We know that regardless of the ruling, I'm not talking about the ruling here. We know that the culture of the music industry, we know the culture of pop music and so on and so forth is a culture that is in antithesis to our culture as Muslims. Do we understand that? I think we all understand that, right? But we get caught up on so-and-so said it's halal and therefore I will indulge. So for me, the better question is, ask yourself, this matter, what is the real reason that we feel so inclined to try and justify it? And that's why for me, when somebody comes to me and says, I am struggling with marijuana, or I'm struggling with music, or I'm struggling with this or that or whatever, like I know it's haram, I know it's bad, but I'm struggling. And I'm having a difficult time giving up, mad respect to this person, right? I can empathize, I can love this person for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because I know that they're trying. So that person compared to somebody who says, no, it's actually halal. So-and-so, somewhere, whatever, and not only, and a lot of times when people quote mashayikh to say that so-and-so said it's halal, they'll take their quote, they'll take their fatwa way out of context, right? They'll be like, oh, Sheikh so-and-so said that musical instruments are halal, or certain types of music halal, meaning all music's halal, right? Regardless of how sexist or whatever this music is, regardless of the profanity and the message or whatever, it's halal because so-and-so said it's halal, right? And that's a disservice, wallahi, to the person that you're conveying from, right? So once again, the question and so for me, the issue of marijuana, the issue of all of this stuff, all of the matters, even halal matters of entertainment, even something like consumerism and materialism, to buy stuff to feel better, right? This is not something which is haram. Allah has made it permissible for us to enjoy things in life, right? Allah has created things. It is normal, completely normal for us to buy things and like buying things and having nice things. Completely normal. But if it gets to a point where we are filling in a void in our life, a spiritual void, with material things, that's when it's problematic. when we are compromising our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of material things, or because of drugs, because of alcohol, because of whatever. We're compromising our relationship with Allah. We're filling that spiritual void with, and we all, subhanAllah, we pick something, right? And it's easy to point fingers, and I know sometimes we look at certain sins and it's easy to point fingers. Right? You see somebody smoking pot, you're like, aha, bad Muslim, right? Why? Because that's visual. You can see it. But we all have our issues. We're all struggling. We're all trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But once again, the question should go back to our spirituality. The question of what is the real reason? What hole in my life am I trying to fill? Even this haram relationship, which I'm not here to talk about relationships, but even a haram relationship, I think most Muslims, or a lot of Muslims, when they're in a haram relationship, they know they're in a haram relationship. You don't have to go to a talk where a sheikh says, oh, it's guys and girls can't be friends, and this gender interaction and this and that or whatever. Like, I don't think most Muslims need to hear that, because they already know. They already know. But the question is, if I'm willing to put myself in this situation, if I'm willing to say, I know I'm not really supposed to be doing this, or this can be dangerous or whatever, but I'm in love, I like this person, inshallah one day I'm gonna marry her, right? Actually, for guys, it's not even that, right? Allahul musta'an. Girls, give girls the benefit of the doubt. Girls who are in a haram relationship, inshallah ta'ala, are thinking, yeah, the person has the intention to marry me. That it will eventually become something halal, right? Why are we willing to compromise that? Because there's a need that's not being fulfilled. We're maybe seeking some satisfaction, we're seeking some approval, we need something to make us feel better. Maybe there's a problem in our self-esteem. Maybe there's a problem in how we feel about ourselves. And we need to be dating this girl or dating this guy to feel better about ourselves. We need to smoke pot to feel better about ourselves. There's this one stand-up comedian, I'm not going to say who, and I'll end with this, inshallah ta'ala, who said, and I'm going to paraphrase, right, because I'm not a comedian, and he used a lot of profanity, right? So one of the things he said in one of his acts, he said the wonderful thing about pot is that it doesn't matter what's happening in your life, right? You could be like going through a really bad time, right? Like you haven't paid rent, they're about to take away your car, right? You lost your job, whatever, but you just sit back and relax, right? In that moment, nothing matters, right? And as a Muslim, subhanAllah, that should scare us. That we are willing to close our eyes to the reality of the world around us. So once again, I'm not really here to talk about the halal and haram, right? Because honestly, we could sit and argue that all day. And I've had those arguments. In my class, somebody would say, well, pot, if you look at this aspect of pot and this and that or whatever, or, there's this fatwa from this scholar and so on and so forth. And so for me, like my goal with young Muslims specifically is for them to get past just the fiqh rulings. Because I think we've done enough of that. There's plenty of lectures where people have said this is haram and this and that, whatever. And that does for me, like even spiritually, only focusing on the ruling itself can be harmful as well. Because not only, maybe we have the confidence, maybe we have the willpower, we have the strength of iman to say, look, I'm going to cut this out of my life, right? Like someone says, I don't listen to music, alhamdulillah, I'm a good Muslim or whatever. Because they have that, they have that willpower. Sometimes they will look at other people and judge them by their own standards, right? So, hey, I could quit, why can't you quit, right? Well, the reality is, once again, that it is about our struggle in worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And worshipping Allah is a struggle, and it is supposed to be a struggle. It is not supposed to be easy. It is supposed to be comforting. It is supposed to bring ease to our heart. It is supposed to it is supposed to fill our spiritual void, but it is not supposed to be easy. That's a big misconception, right? And there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, ad-deenu yusr, that the religion is ease. Some people interpret that to say that Islam is supposed to be easy. Meaning if there's something in Islam that I don't find to be easy, I don't have to do it, right? That is not what the Prophet ﷺ meant. What the Prophet ﷺ meant is that if a person were to submit the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed us to submit, then they would find a type of ease that goes beyond their physical self. That their body can be in pain, they can be struggling, They can even be stressed out, right? But their soul will be at ease. Think of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Do you think they lived an easy life? If you read the stories and hear the stories, they lived lives far beyond the amount of difficulty than we can even imagine. But tell me of a companion who said that I'm not happy, that I'm not okay. Tell me of a companion who knows they're about to go into a battle and they know they're about to face the most difficult thing they have ever faced in their life. There are companions who would leave their houses and they would think to themselves, maybe I will never see my family again. Maybe I will never see my children again. Do you think that's easy? That's not easy. But ask them if they would reconsider. Ask them, maybe you want to change your mind. They would say never. Because they knew the ease and the comfort of the soul that Islam brings. And for us, like I said, all of these issues, whatever every day there's a new issue, right? Is this halal, is that halal, so on and so forth. Our question should be, where am I with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What spiritual implications does this have on me? And for me, as I said, that is a far more productive discussion than simply getting a fatwa and then hammering people on the head with those fatwas. Right? We've been doing that, by the way, in my experience, for over a decade. Muslims in America, we've been doing that for a decade. And I'm sorry, but it's not working. Because someone who already is convinced. You slamming a fatwa on their head is not going to do anything. As a matter of fact, it's going to make them actually run away, right? And that's why if you look at the character of the Prophet ﷺ, it was extremely gentle. The way the Prophet ﷺ would convey the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was in an extremely gentle way. We all know the story of the man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "O Messenger of Allah, make it halal for me to have sex outside of marriage." Right? How did the Prophet ﷺ deal with this person? These were human beings, right? They had desires just like we have desires. The Prophet ﷺ didn't curse him and tell him, like, don't you know the ruling? You're going to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, get out of here. The Prophet ﷺ counseled him. And that's why for me, like a lot of these issues, and that's why even for today, I just wanted it to be kind of like a counseling session, right? But a lot of these issues, they need counseling, they don't need fatwas, right? And so my advice before I let you go, inshallah ta'ala, is that if you're struggling, whether it be marijuana, anything else, any sin, anything that you're struggling with, instead of going and just looking for a fatwa, right? Go get counseling. Speak to someone who can talk to you, counsel you, someone who can mentor you, someone who can really talk to you about what you're really going through rather than just a simple fatwa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.